The Linn-Mar School Board meeting will be called to order at 5 p.m. in the boardroom of the Learning Resource Center. Please take roll to determine a quorum. That's still you. He's not signed in yet.
Dave's not on yet. We thought we had everything covered. And we forgot
One more
the very
time,
first
Gayla.
step.
Maury.
Here.
Nelson.
Here.
Rollinger.
Here.
Walker.
Here.
Wall. Here. Weaver.
Here.
Form president 5 o'clock.
Thank you.
I move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
A motion by Clark and a second by Melissa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have an agenda. All right, first point of business is to relieve Gayla of her temporary duties and swear Dave in. So, yep, go for it.
Don't need to.
Second.
Motion by Rachel and a second by Sandra. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and that you will faithfully and impartially, to the best of your ability, discharge the duties of Secretary and Treasurer for the Linn-Mar Community School District Board of Education as now and hereafter required by law.
I do.
Welcome to the board.
Thank you.
Don't expect to get clapped for every time. It's a good start.
This time, we'll move into audience communications. Those that have signed up to speak, I will read your name and order of sign up. We will receive and acknowledge comments, but will not engage in a dialogue with the speaker because of the set agenda of the meeting. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per speaker and should be shared in a respectful manner. Tiffany Kinzenbaugh.
Good evening. My name is Tiffany Kinzenbaugh, and I've been an educator at Linn-Mar for the last 13 years. Currently, I'm a 4th grade teacher at Echo Hill and would like to take some time today to talk to you about feedback. The feedback I'll be referring to tonight is not the hateful, condescending feedback that I know you have had to endure these past few years. The type of feedback I'd like to focus on is constructive with the intention of solving problems. I'd also like to mention the people that I feel need to be involved. I believe feedback is so important when building culture and climate of any district, building, and classroom. It's the ideas behind the feedback that make people like us educators feel valued. I'd like to reference the board meeting on June 20th, which I attended. During the facilities planning report, it was mentioned a number of times how feedback has been used for the construction that will be happening around the district. Tennis coaches providing feedback on the construction of the tennis courts, administrators providing feedback on the construction of a new LRC, and music teachers providing feedback for a new auditorium. One quote I took away from that discussion was, I couldn't imagine building this without their input because they are the ones that live in it and know little things about what works and what doesn't work. It is vital that the people living in it get to be at the table when decisions are being made. Recently, teachers were told that personal furniture would need to be removed from their classrooms, items that many have spent hundreds of dollars on, yet not one teacher was involved in offering solution-focused feedback on how we could solve the issues that this personal furniture was creating. Teachers are problem solvers. We use daily formative assessments of our students and make necessary changes to our lesson plans to meet their needs. We also make changes to the environment of our classroom so that it's functional, appealing, and inviting for the students. I recently sent a Google form to my students asking them what their favorite part of our classroom was and why. Every student that responded said our classroom library. When asked why, their responses were, it's quiet, I like books, and believe it or not, one said the pillows and rug. Another question I asked was if I could add anything to our classroom, what should I add and why? One of the students said to add more pillows and rugs to the book nook. This is feedback telling me that what students want in their classroom so they can enjoy a space that they are living in 180 days of the year. I want to give you one more example of feedback from a student's perspective. I had classroom jobs for each of my students this past year. After the first month or so of school, students had a couple different jobs. One student asked, can we choose our own jobs? And others agreed with that feedback. In order for this to happen, I had to try and make sure they got a choice that was on their list of jobs they wanted. I also tried as best as I could for them to get a different job each time. It would have been much easier and much less time consuming to just move their 26 names down the list every 2 weeks. But that would not have shown that I valued their feedback. What I want to show with that example is that I was inconvenienced, but I know it meant something to the students, so I listened to their feedback and made time. I want to just reiterate the fact that teachers want to be part of the solution. We understand that there are parameters when decisions are being made at the district building and classroom level. We just want our solution-focused feedback to be heard, which ultimately affects students. Thank you.
Laura Robertson.
All right, well, hello again. I'm Laura Robertson, Linn-Mar teacher and parent of 2 graduates. I'd like to add just a little bit to what Tiffany said. I would like to see our district revisit the classroom furniture mandate issued the week before school dismissed and involve students and teachers in the conversation. Some of the items no longer allowed in our classrooms are necessary parts of the social-emotional learning of our students. For example, the calm down corners recommended by counselors only a few years ago. Especially at the elementary level where students spend over 6 hours in the same classroom, it needs to be a welcoming and comfortable environment which enhances the culture and climate of both the classroom and the building as well. Research supports this and our students need it. Please rethink the decision and allow more voices to be heard. Isn't that the cornerstone of a high reliability school system? Thank you.
Both for coming this evening and sharing your thoughts. That will end audience communications. We'll move on to informational reports. Marion City Council. So there wasn't much in the meeting that I attended or I read the notes from. It was a lot of talking about new parcels and where housing developments were going to happen, but nothing new, no new ones that we were to be aware of, and then more construction updates. Albernet Road seems to be on track, so that's all I have.
The one that I attended to, there was absolutely nothing that would, the district would be concerned about. Basically, there was a discussion that they're waiting for the Department of Transportation to okay the new bridge and walking area so they can start on the more aesthetic parts that they want to put in, but there was nothing related to that we could use for our district. It was the shortest meeting ever.
Okay. Legislative priorities. At our last meeting, we received the 2022 legislative platform from IASB as a review of kind of what was proposed last year and the priorities that were voted on by all of the IASB members. So tonight we want to have a discussion on what 3 or 4 we would like to select as a board to suggest to IASB as the priorities that the organization should take forth this year. Just as a reminder, this does not limit what we can talk about as a board individually. We can always advocate as well on other topics. But I will open the table for discussion on what people think our top 4 priorities should be for this upcoming legislative session.
Start by just saying that I thought it was really difficult to narrow it down to just 4. I had like
That's
6
kind
or
of
7.
tradition, I believe. We all go, just one more, so don't feel bad about that.
We've kind of snuck in a 5th one sometimes, but the new system they have doesn't really allow that anymore. So we
Okay.
do have to get down to 4 at the very most.
Because then when you go to it, they tell you, you put in too many and you're not supposed to do that, so it's kind of interesting, yeah. I don't mind starting. Mental health, I think, is a major priority for us across the board with everything that's been going on the last few years. I think our students need it, our teachers need it, all employees need, that addressed. I think we need the state to think about it in a way of importance. So that would probably be my number 1, other than, of course, the SSA and school funding, which we have to, I think, push for as much as possible, especially with the idea of the possibilities of vouchers and changing things and all of that. And, from there, I've got, special education is the state one because we always are at a deficit. And I don't know if we can ever get that changed around, that formula, but it would certainly be awesome. And 2 others that are somewhat maybe newer, but I thought they looked interesting. That might be a good one, considering our teacher shortage and all. There's teacher recruitment and a licensure one, and also one about local accountability and decision-making. Those were the ones, and obviously it's more than 4, sorry, and I'm willing to negotiate anything, but those were the ones that I thought were probably the most important from my point of view.
Sandra, the teacher recruitment and licensure, and what was the last one that you said?
The local accountability and decision-making. I tell you the numbers if that helps you.
It's
What number is that
29.
one?
It's 29 is the local accountability, and the teacher recruitment is number 16. So mine were 8 and 9, 16, 19, 20, and then 29. So.
And I also had mental health. And I really like the last sentence there. It says, trainings that include referral plans for continuing action provided. You know, I think a lot of our teachers do not have degrees in counseling, but with the mental health aspect and what's going on with the COVID and everything else that has happened to their learning process, whether it was hybrid or in class or virtual, I think, you know, some of those, our students do not voice their frustration. And I think if teachers were a little bit more aware of some of the things that they can do, teachers are so very important. And the first line to be able to deduce or comfortable with the students that they have in class, that they can talk to them, and students will open up to teachers more than they would maybe some outside source. And so I think mental health is exceptionally important, because it puts ourselves that I don't ever want to have somebody say, well, I should have said something. I want faculty and administrators to follow up on something that they just in their gut, they know that there's something going on with this child. And like I said, students will talk to teachers that they're comfortable with. The school funding policy and supplemental state aid, you know, the legislature's got to get their head in the right place, knowing what public school systems are going through. And, you know, 2.5 and stuff like that sounds really good until you try and do a budget. To be quite honest, and this is out of context, I apologize. We're in a situation where open enrollment, you can leave at any time. And I'm sorry, that amounts to, could be a financial crisis to any district, not just ours. And we do not have the capabilities of going back and forth and back and forth. And when our governor put the end to having a date there, I think that even more important the school funding and supplemental aid. I also had in governance the local accountability and decision making. I think nobody knows better than our teachers, administrators, what's important to our district, not some outside person, and what our priorities are and how we can manage and get those done. Rest with the people in our district and the knowledge and the faith that they have in our teachers, administrators, and hopefully our board members. The one thing that I'd like, that has bugged me for a long time, is special education, the state. It is our biggest deficit. It's not $3,000, it's over $3 million. And I think the legislature has got to wake up and help those students and families like they should be taken care of, and it's been ignored, and I know we've addressed it with the legislature, and they, you know, they'll say some political thing to cover it up, but never vote that, okay? So those are mine, and I apologize for being so long. If you've been to one of my track banquets, you know that's the way it is.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The two at the top of my list, I think, are the teacher recruitment and licensure. I think it's important with the shortage that we're seeing in lots of areas. So I think that needs to, in my opinion, be close to the top of the list. On the mental health section of this, I think we all agree that there are very large problems with mental health in the school system currently. What makes me nervous about pushing forward with that one is I don't know that putting more responsibility on faculty, teachers to do this sort of thing is the right way to go. I feel that we need to focus more on the education rather than, not to say that we need to kick this off to the side, that's not what I'm saying at all. So don't take it as me saying that. But I believe there are better ways to handle that rather than in school. So knowing that there is mental health issues, I also see that there are problems that could create. So that one is a sticking point for me. Dropout, at-risk students is one that I believe should be looked at as well. And to go along with what Clark mentioned, special needs funding, like he mentioned, is over $3 million a year for this district. That's a lot of money that is unfunded for truly the most vulnerable population in the school. So I would like to look into that as being one of my priorities as well.
Can you tell me what number the dropout at risk, just, it helps?
7.
Thank you,
Sorry.
guys. I mean, I could have gone through, but I appreciate that extra info.
Yeah, whichever one of you wants to go.
Try that again. Sorry, Matt. I've got mental health on my list. I think the important thing to remember here as we look over that is that this is largely in order to ascertain funding that can connect students with mental health professionals who are trained in this, not to put more on teachers. You know, it looks like from my reading there that that there would be training ongoing for teachers and administrators and support staff, but you know, teachers are already experiencing the effects of having students come in who do have mental health challenges, and giving them training in order to be able to meet those needs, I think, is important. But, you know, allowing things like in-person telehealth visits, funding streams for mental health professionals that can be in the school, that are trained for this sort of thing, I think is so critically important, and we've seen that over the last number of years. So I think that should be I think that has to be a part of our priorities. I've got school funding policy here. This is really hard because it's like we're looking at all these different policies that refer to the money. And so they've got supplemental state aid, the school funding policy, we've got special education funding, and even that's broken down into state and federal. So, I mean, I think of those, the school funding policy is probably the most comprehensive that can kind of hit on more of what we want than maybe any one individual beside that. But I also think we've got to pick a special education priority, and I don't know what the best one to go for on that, whether that's through the state funding or if it's through federal funding. I don't know which one is more likely to be successful. So, you know, I'm certainly open to feedback from the rest of you guys on what you think there. And then I was gonna choose something different, but Sandra has brought me over to her side, and that is local accountability and decision-making. We've seen a lot of infringement on that, and so I would like to make that a priority once again. And that's it. That's all I got.
Melissa?
I can't make a decision, so I'm just going to tell you all the things. Then.
As long as we're not reading a list of all like 30, whatever.
No, I
then
have
we're
like
good.
6.
Okay.
So English language learners is one that I put on there. I know that that doesn't impact as many students as some of the others, but I have heard from so many families this year that have said that either families or staff members from the district that have said that they feel like this is a population that's being underserved, and it's because of the money. And so I really do feel like that's something that either we as a district need to be advocating for, or we need to be working on that more globally across the state to be ensuring that all of the students and families within our district that need that service, that our district has the funding that we need to be able to support those families adequately. Dropout and at risk, I agree that that one, there's so many services that we could be providing if we had adequate funding to be able to support that. Mental health, I think, is a no-brainer in my mind. There's such a strong correlation between the students that are getting the mental health support that they need and their academic success, that when we have the data that we have seen around the increase in mental health concerns among students in our community, along with across the state and further, I feel like this has got to be a priority. State special education, because of the huge deficit, that I feel like addresses so many other aspects of our budget if we could get that addressed. The teacher recruitment and licensure, I think that one I would in some ways question a little bit, only because I think some of these things did get passed in the last legislative session, and so I feel like we've made some progress, and I don't feel like there would need to be as much lobbying to make those things happen, but I do feel like it's a priority. And then I kind of went back and forth between would the school funding policy or the supplemental state aid be a higher priority. And so I would defer to those of you that have a little bit more experience working with IASB and the legislators on this specific issue to know which of those would be more impactful to the school budget. But I feel like one or the other of those. And the last one is the local accountability and decision making. I feel like there's been so many things that, and I think that goes back, also relates to number 27, the unfunded mandates. If we could just get control over some of these, we would have so much more ability to make a difference in our district. There, that's it.
No, we have 5 that have the most tally marks. So in going through I have very similar thoughts. I did write down dropout and at-risk, but more as I bet IASB is going to make that their 5th priority again this year, because last year they added that as a 5th, and they had a whole advocacy campaign where they were working on that. So my guess, I don't know officially, but my guess would be that they're going to bring all that back and try and, they had a bill written out and everything that they were trying to get through, and it just didn't make it through the second funnel, I think. I think it made it through the first funnel and didn't make it through the second. So my guess is that will come back on its own, and we might not need to make that a top priority because it'll kind of take care of itself, but that's just my opinion.
Can I interject that the very last 2 pages, everybody, if you didn't spot that, this is what it was last time. So it's the dropout, mental health, teacher recruitment. So that'll, if Britt's referring to it or whatever, that might
yeah.
be, it's the last 2 pages there.
Oh,
Sorry.
no, that's okay.
That's good.
So I did write that down, and I do think it's important if they do the big push and they bring their bill back up again, I think that we should advocate on behalf of that. But I kind of think that one's going to take care of itself in terms of it's already a priority. So where I was falling, obviously 19 and 20 school funding policy and supplemental state aid, I lean more towards making the school funding policy the priority because the last bullet is include a mix of state aid and property taxes. State aid is supplemental state aid, so that bullet kind of incorporates SSA. And I think that we should try and take, at least from the local level, when we're helping promote, if this makes it a priority, is what does SSA actually look like and what does our district need? It's one thing to say we need 4% to break even, but what does that mean to someone who doesn't understand school finance? Can we say that we have X number of students that can't take the math course they want because we don't have enough math teachers, because we can't hire enough math teachers because we got 2.1%? Can we talk about that if we don't get enough SSA and funding doesn't come in, that it increases class sizes because we can't add another section because that's another person? Can we talk about what the numbers actually mean in our advocacy? So for me, my vote would go to school funding policy, and we can incorporate SSA into a larger conversation about what the numbers actually mean day to day in our district. So I'm a vote for funding. I also did list mental health, but with a giant asterisk, that school counselors are not in this conversation, and that baffles me, because school counselors are trained. They have master's degrees, and they are trained to do tier 1, 2, and 3 interventions and to help students in the school setting so that there's an on-site person. And no, they're not going to handle everything. We're going to do outside referrals when it gets to a certain level. But why are they not part of this conversation? And why are we not getting, if we're going to increase mental health funding, why are we not asking for more funding for more school counselors and making sure that our school counselors are doing the work of a school counselor? So for me, if we're going to vote for mental health as a priority, I would like to ask IASB to add in school counselor language so that we're actually funding the people that are in our schools already to do this work, to work with the community members that we would be referring them to, as outlined in all of these other bullets. So that's one, that's my thought on mental health. I did write down, I had 2 that were not mentioned by anybody else. I'll mention them, but we can totally go with what everybody else has already said. I wrote down research-based initiatives, which is number 1 under student achievement and accountability. I'd like to see a focus from the legislature on making decisions about education that is based in educational research and not the random story they heard from one person, but actually talking to people who study education and study how to teach and study how students think. I also had early literacy circled, just because, again, if we don't create that foundation at the elementary level, it's so hard to catch them back up when they get caught in the system in middle school or high school. I would agree with all the discussion around special education. I don't think we need to pick and choose. I think we could tell IASB that our priority is state special education and then write a letter to our federal representatives and ask them to work on the federal special education separately. Or talk to NASB?
Yeah.
There we go.
SBA,
Job.
IASB, and SBA.
Okay, NSBA.
It'd be nice if they aligned consistently, but they don't.
So ISB probably has more influence on the state level as a state organization, and we have a national organization that could maybe do the national level special education. The funding formula is broken at both levels for special education, so I say we just talk about it in both places.
I would like to step in here for 1 second since you brought that up. I would like to see IASB sever ties with NSBA for reasons that IASB even has admitted is there. There's another national organization that other states are moving towards. I believe there's been 26 or 28 states who have severed ties with the National School Board Association, and I would like to see us advocate for that. I know this, maybe this isn't the right time for the discussion, but you brought up the NSBA. So I don't know that.
What is the other national group?
I can't think of the name of it right now. IASB, in an email, had it. I will go back and find it and send it to you.
I've read the emails, I just can't think of what the name of the other group
I
is.
can't either right now, but.
I can say that last year at the delegate assembly, it was moved. So right now it's in the IASB bylaws that IASB has to be a member of the
Right.
national organization. And there was a motion made to remove that requirement from the bylaws, and the members voted it down. So for IASB to leave the national organization, the bylaws would first have to be changed. And since that was voted down a year ago, I don't know that they'll ask again, but that would be something that comes up at the conference in November.
And I'm just mentioning that that's
Yep.
something that I would like to advocate for.
Okay.
A couple of things to throw into the mix as
Right.
well. Not to complicate things, because I really think there's a lot of commonality between everybody's list, a lot of overlap, which isn't surprising. It's hard to nitpick and really refine those final pieces then. A couple things I wanted to mention, though, the number 7, dropout at risk, several of you have mentioned. That one I think is important for us to advocate in one way, shape, or form. Partially because not a lot of schools, let me rephrase that, not all schools in Iowa are going to advocate for that one at all, because they are already at the maximum funding level, and we are not. We are at the minimum funding level. So I think that's just a piece to keep in mind, that if schools like us don't advocate for that change, it's not going to happen, because a lot of schools now are already happy with it. They're getting twice as much funding per student than we are. And that's just an equity issue to me that's needs to be addressed. And there has been some momentum on that the last couple of years, and the legislature just hasn't quite gotten that next step. So I think that's an important one to help push through to the finish. But we can do that either this way or other routes. I don't want to lose the track of that one either, because we are one of the schools that, if we received the 5% funding instead of the 2.5%, we could address a lot of these other issues, mental health, some of the different things, and support counselors, additional things to address that as well. But we're limited with our funds, which is very frustrating.
Is that the one that last year they talked about gradually over 5 years increasing that? Okay.
There was a
that's
lot
what
of talk in
thinking.
legislature to, instead of going from 2.5% as the minimum to 5% maximum, to
Over.
raise that
Yeah.
by a half a point
Okay.
for several years. Kind of like they've been doing with some of the transportation equity and some of the other funding inequities as well, but it just didn't quite get to that finish line. So, so that's the one I wanted to just mention as a district that's on the short end of that stick. I think it is important that we advocate in some way, shape, or form for that piece too, to get this through the finish line, because that's resources that our neighboring schools are getting that we're not, and that needs to be resolved. Everything else you mentioned, I could see going with one versus the other on everything as well, but I just wanted to put that plug in for that one, because we are in a unique position.
Where are we at, Britt, on our tally?
So funding, we have more tallies next to funding policy than SSA. Does anyone want to make an argument that we should be focusing more on SSA than we should funding policy, or do we want to go with the tally marks as they currently stand?
Let's just see how what the other,
Okay.
come up with, the other tallies.
Okay, so funding
Please.
has 5 tallies. Mental health has 5 tallies. Special education has 4. Local accountability has 4. Dropout at risk has 4. ELL has, English language learning has 1. Research-based initiatives has 1. Early literacy has 1. SSA has 3, basically. Melissa was in both, so she's 3.
I agree with you, Shannon, about the importance of our dropout at-risk funding. I really do. I would like to point out that in the school funding policy, it says equitably funds all, no, that's not what I was looking for. Equalizes per pupil funding for all program areas. So I do see dropout prevention as kind of being included in school funding policy. And what were the two that had 4, Britt? The local accountability?
8 special education and local accountability.
How many did the teacher recruitment and licensure have?
3.5. There was a maybe.
Wait, can I see your paper really quick? Maybe I need to.
Read my chicken scratch. Good luck.
Okay, I see. State special education has 5. Is that correct?
That's what I had on my tally.
Okay.
Doesn't mean
So,
that's true.
I think, I'm saying, I don't know. Let me just say this, because I can't really, you're right, I can't understand what you've got down here. I just want to advocate really quick, once again, for 29, which is the local accountability and decision-making. I think for us, this is pretty existential. You know, if we abdicate that to the state, we are, in my opinion, failing Linn-Mar. We have to be able to make decisions that are best for this district and our students. So, you know, I could be persuaded on all sorts of the other ones. I'm sure you guys can make some fantastic arguments for those, but I just want to really plug this one as maybe even my number 1.
State special ed is 4. There's a squiggle line because I had a 9 because it's number 9, and so I made a squiggle line between my tally marks and the number 9, so it didn't. That's what that is.
So we had school funding.
We have 5 for school funding policy. We have 5 for mental health. Those are our top 2.
Okay.
Then we have 4 for state special education, 4 for local accountability, and 4 for dropout at risk.
Okay, so
And
then
3 for teacher
Well,
recruitment.
that's 5, though.
I know, so we have to pick 4.
We have to pick 4.
We have to pick one.
the top are mental health, the ones that have the most, the 4 that have the most.
Funding
Mental health,
policy and mental health.
Funding policy, local accountability.
Local accountability is only 4.
No, I'm saying the 4 that have the most tallies.
Funding policy, mental health, state special education, and local accountability have the most. And, well, no, dropout and at risk. Dropout
Right.
at risk, state special education, and local accountability all have 4.
But we
tallies.
can drop out prevention, maybe the 5th, maybe IASB's sort of potential 5th, and also it's covered under school funding.
Covered under school funding, but as Shannon said,
Not specified.
it's
but
not
we'd have
specified,
to
and only half of the
elaborate.
state have incentive to actually go after that as a priority, because half the schools already get the full 5%. So the only schools that are going to benefit from that legislation are the ones that are stuck at 2.5.
What
So
is
if we did
specified
that-
under the school funding policy is reflecting actual costs for special education services.
Mm-hmm.
My thought is,
Could take that one out.
if we can get 3, we have to have these submitted to ISB by August 12th, and we have a board meeting that week. So we could reach out to ISB and see if they have decided if they're going to reintroduce their bill. Based on that, like if we know they're already going to make it a priority, then we don't need to make it one of our 4 submitted.
We had to have these in before our next board meeting, but I have to double check those dates for when they're.
I was looking at my phone earlier for, our next meeting is August 8th,
This is our next. I thought we had to have it for them before that.
and we
But I'm
have to
going
have them
off
in
of
by the
memory.
12th, which is that following Friday.
Are we
We
sure
can
about that?
certainly
I don't
follow
care.
up with them and see. We have a contingency plan, so if we reach out to them and then we'd have to have it in before then, we'll know what the top 4 would be. And then if we get word from them that they're going to continue to advocate for dropout at risk or anything on their own without everything, obviously that takes that one off of our list of priorities, I think. It's the same challenge every year. We have more needs than there are priority spots, so we always have to sacrifice something, so we'll have to
If we did-
sort that out and continue to
Deadline
advocate
is
for it
August
either way.
12th, says on their website.
Okay. If we did advocate for dropout prevention, what would the other one, what would we toss?
I
Would-
know that we believe that this, and that the special education is a really, really high priority, but I also do believe that it is incorporated into the school funding policy because it's specifically mentioned in there as reflecting the actual cost for special education services. So that would give us grounds to continue to advocate for that, and I have that continue to be an identified priority for us. We wouldn't be necessarily letting that one go. That would be a way
would be
for us to be
comfortable
able
with that
to
if-
still say that that's one of our priorities, and because it's already specified under the school funding policy.
I think that would be, I think that's a good idea.
Then our 4,
Yeah, I do.
if we note that state special education is a bullet point under funding policy, then our 4 would be funding policy, mental health, local accountability, and dropout at risk prevention.
Like that?
Me.
Do we have-
29, 7, 19, and 8, do I have my notes correct on that? 29, local accountability, 7, dropout at risk, 19, school funding policy, 8, mental health.
Yes.
But if we find out that state is, like Britt was saying, if we find out that they're going to already add the dropout at
We can-
risk on their priority, then that would give us one more, right?
Special ed state would be our,
Yeah, then we could
Just
stay
one
with
then, is that-
this,
Yeah, we could swap in.
the specific special ed. I mean, what I'm saying is that we got our bases covered with whatever
what.
we find
Good
out.
idea.
Can I just say one more thing before we're done with this conversation? So I know we were talking about special ed funding at the state level versus the federal level. And I know we can advocate through our national representatives, but there are not many of them in the state of Iowa. And I think, we've sort of been beating our head up against the wall about this for any number of years. And the reality is that the federal government has a much larger pot to be able to actually make a dent in this. And I do think that if a statewide organization like IASB came out really advocating that, I think it would make an impression. I think it would get a lot of coverage, and it might encourage other states to step up to the plate on that. I just think it's perhaps, a better bang for your buck if we focused at the federal level this go round. I don't know how many other districts will be of like mind, but that's just kind of what I was thinking about this.
I was thinking the same thing, because Rachel's right that the federal level for special ed is actually where majority of our funds come from, so it does make more sense if we're going to truly close that deficit, that's the place to bark up that tree. But also knowing that we are making priorities for Iowa Association of School Boards, I just have not seen them take that step to the federal level. So maybe that's a question for us we can reach out to them and see what their plan would be for that, or what their history has been, because I just have not seen them take that role. Maybe it's happened behind the scenes and I'm not aware of it, but they have definitely played more of a state-focused
Well, I don't think you're
organization on that
wrong.
piece of
I don't
it.
think you're wrong, but wouldn't it, I just can imagine, I would love to see them step up to the plate on that, because I do think that they could have an impact. And I just don't see it coming from the state level. I just really don't.
We really want them to take a stand at the federal level, that we should start now advocating for it to be a priority next year. Because if we can get them on board with doing it, then they can talk to districts ahead of this process. Because if districts don't all come together
Right.
and say, this is one of our top 4, it's not gonna go anywhere. So I think that's something that, if you think about the long term, start talking about more advocating at the federal level by ISB a year from now, session 2024, and see where they're at, rather than throwing one of ours at federal special education right now, kind of knowing that my guess would be not many Iowa districts
Right.
are going to make that a top 4.
Well, I think you're probably right there, and I wonder too if we could really start having this conversation with UEN, because certainly they've got some influence, and
Good
I
idea.
think, I think,
good idea.
I think, I just really do think that getting the federal government to cough up the money is far more likely than getting the state government to do so.
Why don't we say,
Never met that commitment.
Jeez.
This explains the deficit that
okay,
unfunded
so
mandate.
what I'm hearing in summary, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, our top 4 that we'll submit are funding policy, mental health, local accountability, dropout at risk. If we find that dropout at risk is going to already be a pushed priority, we'll sub in state special education. And then on our own, we will start having conversations with the UEN, with our federal representatives, and possibly the national organization on federal special education advocacy. And we will take Lisa's numbers and many, many more and start making some noise. Does that summarize our?
Sounds good. Britt, I agree with your mention with mental health about counselors, and I think that if we can, maybe when we're sending in our information, if we can make note of that, I think that would be important. We have a huge group of wonderful counselors in our Linn-Mar district, and yet it's not large enough, because our mental health problems are growing and growing, just like they are everywhere. But along with that, I don't believe we're really utilizing the counselors we have appropriately. And because of that, those, especially at the elementary, my experience and what I've seen and heard is that those people are now not able to actually serve as counselors as we think of as counselors, because they have been put into a situation where they are part of a rotation where they are with the large group all the time, instead of being able to do that one-on-one or 1 or 2 or 3, which is what is the most effective way to get to the needs of students. And that's one of the things that we ourselves, without any extra funding at all, can make a change for. Now, I realize that's going to get a lot of people all upset, but I think we need to look at the bigger picture of needing to be able to have those professionals ready, they're well-trained to do what they do in the right way. I will be quiet.
Things we can look at internally as well. But the other piece I would just add to it is we have our 4 identified priorities. But the other items that are mentioned, that doesn't mean we will not be advocating for those, because I think we all agree items, teacher recruitment, licensure, supplemental state aid, those are things we're still going to have to advocate for individually and as a district as well. It just may not be through our prioritized legislative group that we share with IASB and everybody else as well, because this is not a either or. It's really do both. It's just how do we prioritize the top 4 and go from there on the rest of them as well, because there's no end of things in sight as far as things we need to address.
These are IASB's priorities, and as members, we're giving input. We can set our own. When we get closer to session and perhaps past the election and we have an idea about what the session is going to look like, we can have a conversation at the board table about what our district legislative priorities are. And some of them they'll align with these 4, but then we can also say we'd also like to spend some time talking about X, Y, Z. And so we can have that conversation later this fall when we have a better idea of what, who's going to be in the session and what that's going to look like. So.
One of the things that I find frustrating is that, and Shannon, maybe you can correct me, that when the legislature was over for this session, the state had a surplus of $3 billion plus. Is that correct?
I don't know the exact amount, but it is in that ballpark that you're describing, yes.
And see, that's, being in education as long as, that's the frustrating part is we have this. We have a lot of places that it can go, from students to teachers to administrators to counselors, and it's just out there and wasn't used. I'm not saying you bring the $3 billion down to 0, but, our legislatures need to use some of that where it really counts. And I would agree with Sandra on the counseling, and Britt and I know have talked about this in support of that. When you take a look at the counselors and all of the students that are encompassed in, let's say Bowman Woods, one counselor, but got the whole building. And now that we're rotating, it's just one of those things that I will be looking at as we get into different budgets into our district, if the possibility to add that and take some of the pressure off of our faculty.
Anyone else have any other discussion under legislative priorities? Next up, strategic planning update. We've been quite busy this summer, even though we're trying not to be busy. So just an update on where we're at in the process. If you remember the last time we talked as a group, we kind of laid out some options, and the feedback from the board was we wanted to have an outside facilitator. We wanted to have someone guide us through process, helping us understand the data that we get back from our stakeholders. So over the last few weeks, we looked at, I want to say about 5 to 6, we reached out to 5 or 6 different strategic planning resources that had been shared with us. We heard back from 3. I met with all 3 of them and kind of did a preemptive, this is what we're looking for, what are your services, that kind of thing. And 2 of them came back with proposals. Shannon Clark and I are meeting with one of them tomorrow to kind of dig deeper into what that would look like. And we're hoping to have a recommendation for the board at our August meeting, the first August meeting, of what our recommendation is, and hopefully it meets all of the criteria that everyone had given us. So that's kind of where we're at. We're looking at kicking it off late September, early October, and finishing up early February. So that's kind of an update of where we're at. We've been meeting with different organizations and talking with different people and seeing what our options are, and we're gonna meet with one of them tomorrow, and then we'll have more information at the next meeting. And I think I just said all of that twice, so.
The other thing is excited about what they've been able to provide so far. This is good information that I think will help us really gather a wide breadth of opinions and thoughts and perspectives from people as well. So I think so far I've been impressed with what we've seen and look forward to learning more tomorrow.
Any questions? I'll hand it over to you for your update.
Yeah, a month ago, I came and told you that all the summer projects were progressing nicely and on schedule to be completed on time, and I kind of knocked on wood then, thinking I was going to jinx it, and I did. The very next day, I believe it was, we got updates from one project that has been problematic since our last board meeting, and that is the stadium turf replacement project. If you've noticed, they came and took out our old turf almost ASAP after the school year ended, and it's pretty much sat there since that time period. So there's been some delays in production of the turf. So now which now caused a delay in the installation of the turf, and now we are looking at August 12th as the start date for the installation. So obviously that gets us into football season and marching band season and everything else that comes with that in the fall too. So we have some challenges there yet, but we do have a little window before first home games take place as well. So hopefully that'll be the last delay we'll have to have, but that's become a stressor that we didn't think we'd have a month ago. So other projects across the district are taking place and moving along. There'll be some loose ends potentially at some spots with a little item here or there, but otherwise roofing projects, parking lots, all the other repair work from derecho still that we're playing catch up on are progressing nicely. Probably the other largest item project people are noticing if they drive by 10th Street or Excelsior one way or the other, that parking lot is pretty much gone. They're starting to pour the cement today to access the back entrance, so that will start to look more and more like a finished project here in the next few weeks as well too, and that's still scheduled to be completed by the start of the year too. So excited about all that. I think it's going to go well. We just need good weather to continue for the next several weeks to get these projects wrapped up.
The project still has the project delay fees built
Yes.
from the contract,
There's
right?
a daily financial penalty for them for every day thereafter.
That's going to be my question.
Is it August 11th, Dave? August 8th? Do you remember off the top of your head? I don't remember the exact date, but it's somewhere in that arena though. So the date there, that's what seems
Good.
right to me
Maybe we'll
too.
get
If you could
Free?
give that to us in our memo, just so we have that. Appreciate it.
You can do that.
We're getting more and more questions about what's going on in Excelsior, and I've even seen like people with drone images, like what's going on, and they're posting it to like the Marion happenings page and all that stuff. So people are curious about the parking lot and the driveway. So
It looks, if you drive by, especially the backside of it now, there's piles of dirt and concrete and gravel all over the place. So it's definitely one of those projects that got worse before it's getting better, and it's starting to get to that stage now where the progress will be evident for everybody. So the other project that isn't really our project but definitely impacts us is the intersection of Albernet Road and Echo Hill Road. Anybody trying to get to Echo Hill or Hazel Point right now, they're very limited, have to come from the north. That is still, last we heard from the city, still progressing. Even though it looks like right now a mess, it's still progressing to have 3 legs of that 4-leg project completed by the start of the school year. The only leg that will not be completed is the north entrance point, which we had talked about earlier as well. So hopefully good weather will continue to allow that city project to move forward too, because that is obviously a big deal come August 23rd.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can't even imagine what that would look like if it's not ready.
last fun windstorm had some fun with the. Is it a big deal or?
I will have to get the fence on the far east end of it is blown over, so yeah, that's something we'll have to get taken care of too. So it may be a little more temporary than we normally would do. Just a long-term plan for a facility for the tennis courts, but yeah, we'll definitely need to get that fixed.
To the last big windstorm, a fence is fine, but I did notice that it was kind of all wonky and warped, so I was curious.
New
Wonky and warped is a good description.
Put it in the wrong way anyhow.
Yeah.
So facility planning update, this is an update I feel like I give you all the time, but things have been progressing nicely. Speaking of tennis courts, we do have the new layout of the courts that were brought. I mentioned to you last time, worked with OPN last week to get that a little bit farther along. So they're going to come back to us with a final layout of adding some sidewalks and entrances and some fences and some gates, some smaller details to that. And then once we get that brought to the board, we'll be able to go take that out to bid yet this fall. So I feel like we're in a really good spot there. I meet with Marion Parks and Rec Department next week about our updated plans and see opportunities for us to partner now that we know the structure and layout with everything. So looking forward to that conversation. The high school north parking lot I shared with you on Friday, the first layout of that design. As you noticed in Friday's memo, it's a few parking spots less than we initially hoped. But I think the trade-off there is instead of having 3 or 4 rows of just dead-end traffic and cars going down, backing up, it'll be much more natural flow to the traffic and tie into the road that goes around the stadium right now as well. So we lose 30 parking spots or so, but we gain much better traffic flow in and out of there as well. So getting the final draft for that, and that will go out to bid this fall with spring projection time to get that project started too. So those are the 2 smaller projects that are basically ready to go. We're getting very close to it. Our 2 larger projects we're working on right now, administrative building. Cabinet met with OPN last week, continue the work of defining the spaces that we need in the facility. What does that look like? And right now we're going to continue to meet with them every couple of weeks. Our goal right now is to bring a schematic design and cost estimate to the board at our second board meeting in August, so August 29th. Might be September 12th board meeting. We'll see how fast we can move things along. But for at least initial look at what that would look like from the facility. I mentioned the cost piece of it because that is something that it's not going to be a surprise to anybody, but the cost of everything has gone up since we put these numbers together. Admin building's one thing, auditorium, everything we do right now, the inflation cost is definitely impacting our budget. So I share that with you just to be aware as we move forward. That is going to be something we'll have to be very thoughtful of, and it will be significantly different than our initial first thoughts from 18 months ago, it looks like. But otherwise, I like how that building's kind of shaping up so far in the basic spaces of the building, and I think that location that we picked at the last board meeting is really shaping up to be a nice spot there for us as well, so excited for that. And then the auditorium, I mentioned to you last time we're scheduled to go visit some schools in central Iowa that have newer or brand new auditoriums. We did that last Wednesday, I believe it was, Thursday, one of those days last week. We visited Valley, Waukee, Northwest, Johnston, and Ames. OPN, high school administration, music department, myself went. Really, really good visit. I learned so much about auditoriums of things that I didn't even know existed behind the scenes and in their design, and things I really don't want to know, but it's obviously need to know for this project. It was really interesting to see. A couple of our staff members were, in their terms, geeking out on all the technical aspects behind the scenes on the auditorium. I was appreciative of that. So 4 really, really nice facilities, and some of them are designed a little bit different intentions than ours. So that was good to see some things that we don't want to do because of how we're designing our auditorium piece as well. So OPM put together some sharing documents for everybody to give some feedback. Had to be submitted to them today, and then they're going to summarize that and send it out to the group to help them refine the next steps in their design process as well. So some really good progress on that project as well. And that was, again, the auditorium, we're doing a lot of work right now, but because of the size of the project, the location of it, the cost, the complications that go with that, their goal for OPN is to come up with some initial design and proposal pieces for us budget-wise to bring to the board for consideration this fall, and then we can give them the green light to move ahead, or we may need to make some adjustments. I just don't know at this stage yet. It's too early to tell, but this one, even though it feels like we're making a lot of progress, we know it's a very early step yet until we decide how we want to proceed from there. So, and then the last one I'll just mention, because this is more of a phase 2 project, but it's something we've been talking about at Cabinet. At some point sooner rather than later, we're going to have a conversation as a board about the future of this building. We know when we leave as an administrative team and LRC staff and go to the new building in hopefully 2 years, that this building will be repurposed for the high school. And we know initially it'll be high school reuse of it, but the bigger question becomes, how long do we keep this building in operation for high school students? Do we remodel this? Do we tear this down and start over? Do we do a hybrid of the combination of those type of things? And the reason we're going to have to make that decision sooner rather than later is as we prepare to move to our new site, there are some big things we have to decide, from things you probably wouldn't even think about. Our tech cave, does all of that move to the new spot, or we keep that operating here for a foreseeable future? Our food service department, you may not even realize it, but when you walk out the door to go to the parking lot, that first door outside the building is actually our refrigerator freezer space for the food service department as well. So does that continue to be used, or does that all get repurposed too? So just want you to be aware of those things, because that conversation on the future of this building will probably come to you sooner than we initially thought, just because we have to decide how much do we reinvest in this building and how much of it do we want to be careful of and not spend, knowing it's only going to be for a couple of years or something along those lines too. So no action for you yet. We'll have more information and data for you, but just to plant that seed to be thinking about where your thoughts are on this building's long-term future. So, and then the final thing I would throw out there is just congratulations to Linn-Mar softball making it to state. Softball, exciting sub-state game last week to get there. They played their first game of state today. Unfortunately, they lost, but they do play in the consolation side of the bracket tomorrow morning. So good luck to them as they finish out their season. Very, very successful season. Conference champs, state qualifiers, fun group to watch. So with that, any questions of things that I rambled through? I'm open to take questions or comments.
About the future of this building. I know that you're having conversations with Jeff and his team about what their needs are, and that information summarized would be helpful for our conversation, because I don't think we can make decisions about this building without knowing the future needs and what they're thinking. So I would ask for that information when we have that conversation.
Absolutely.
Anybody else?
Thanks.
As we move into unfinished business, first up is the policy recommendations. I do want to note that policy 1004.3, the tobacco, nicotine, and free environment policy, was pulled today. We just had a request to create more clarification on the use of the words controlled substances and better define what that means. So we're going to send that back to policy, have that better defined, and then bring it back to the board. So that you'll see is noted. It's crossed off on the agenda.
Motion to approve the second reading of the policy recommendations with the exception and removal of policy 1004.3 for further review by the policy committee.
By Melissa and a second by Rachel. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I make a motion to approve the open enrollments as presented.
Second.
By Clark, second by Melissa. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion by Melissa and a second by Rachel. Any discussion?
Yes. I would like to wish Dana Lampe the very best on her other employment. That's going to be a big loss to the district. And I would also like to thank Carla Terry on her retirement for all the work she has done for the volunteer program. Sometimes I think she's kind of like the Energizer Bunny trying to get everything done. And as I look here, I also like to congratulate Corey Brinkmeyer coming back to be the boys soccer coach. He's been there, done that, and welcome him back.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I know we got some information in our weekly memo regarding some contracts that I brought up. It's typical things that I brought up in the past, but there are 3 contracts here that I think warrant at least some discussion. The first one is 804.3, the AgVantage FS energy agreement. Right on that contract, highlighted in yellow, it says contract offer is void if not signed and postmarked by July 10th, 2022. That could be a problem with the volatility of fuel. I wanted to bring that to the attention on that one specifically.
I can mention to that one right away, we did not receive the initial quote from them until after our last board meeting, so there was not an opportunity to get it approved in that time frame that they have as well with it then as well. So
is there something, just out of my own curiosity, is that something that whomever is working with them knows that that date needs to be post our next meeting? Is that something that needs to be looked into?
that's something we'll have to look at to make sure that that alignment matches up better with our current meeting schedule and their timing of their deadline for us as well.
The other 2 I want to bring attention to are 15 and 16. Both Similar issues that I see in this one. Again, this is a contract from September of 2021 to be concluded by October 6th of 21, and we're just seeing the contract now, which is the issue that I had brought up on other contracts. But these two, if you look on these contracts were signed and whited out. You can see that there's a signature and the school board president line on both of these contracts, and it was whited out. And these contracts were signed August 10th of 21. So it just brings questions to my mind on, I don't understand, and maybe when we have our one-on-one you can explain these a little bit better. But this raises questions on why was that signed? Why were both of these contracts signed? And also, are these contracts already paid?
Well, they have not been paid until board approval
Okay.
would take the next step towards payment.
So it seems really odd that a contractor would do a work almost a year ago and not want to be paid for it. So
These are the two that specifically got stuck in the computer system, not that weren't turned in on time. So I would say that when in Shannon's memo, when he talked about the technology aspect of some of the contracts getting stuck in the computer, that would be this. So
Right.
that would explain
Yeah.
these two.
I understand that, but my question on asking if they'd been paid is, I've done contract work. I don't let a contract sit for a year without getting paid. So I'm curious as to why this hasn't been brought up prior to now. And the signature being whited out is a real concern to me.
I don't know the signature piece of it, Matt. I'd have to do some double check on that to get you an answer for that piece of it. There is some, like we said in the past, I want to be careful not to throw anybody under the bus, because that's never my intention in a public meeting. But there were some mistakes made by individuals as well on past contracts, just not getting them in on time. Just the procedure is just out of routine after a couple COVID years with everything as well. And then there's also some confusion with our staff sometimes about which things need to have a contract to go to board, which things do not, which things do they have authority to approve. So there's still some clarifications on those things we are fixing as well. So, but I can't specifically say if that's why that was initially signed or not. I do not have the answer to that one for you right now. But what I will say is I echo your frustration with it too, because we don't want to have this continue to happen, and we are working to get this resolved. And the fact that we're going back to get this year cleaned up, we are much more diligent going forward with everything to make sure it does not happen again for the future ones. So your frustration is noted, justified, and it's something we are working behind the scenes to make sure we, one, educate our staff, have our systems and communications in place to ensure that happens in a timely manner and the right process and procedures in place with it as well. Mistakes have been made, and we are working to get that fixed.
Hey, Matt, how can you tell that it's been whited out?
If you look at the contract, you can actually see that there's part of a signature on both of those contracts. The upper part of the signature and the lower part of the signature, and it's obviously whited out.
Okay.
My guess is that someone signed the wrong line.
That's
But-
possible. I
And I
thought
do
that
not
too,
know.
but it's funny that both of these contracts were done in the same day. Two different people. I don't know. It's just a concern. I wanted to bring it up because it's a concern.
Both show choir, right? So my guess is that the same person handed the same contract and explained it the same way to two different people and then realized that they signed on the wrong line. That would be my assumption. Again, I don't know.
It's
but-
possible. It's possible.
Any other questions, discussion on the consent agenda? All those in favor? I have a motion, I have a motion by Melissa, second by Rachel. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Last thing we have, board communications. Matt, you're still good for the July 21st city council meeting?
Yep.
Okay, and we'll double check with Barry. Our next board meeting is August 8th. We do have the staff welcome back on August 17th. We are going to, as a board, if you can make it, come at 7:30, and we're going to serve breakfast to the staff this year as a welcome back thank you. Be some good engagement there. So If you're not able to make it that day, just let us know. And do I have any volunteers for the August 18th City Council meeting?
Can do it.
Believe it or not, first day of school is coming up quite soon, so that's on there. Any other for the good of the cause? Right. To entertain a motion.
Moved.
Second.
All right, I have a motion by Sandra and a second by Rachel to adjourn at 6:15. All those in favor?